and welcome to another episode of Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is the podcast where I share 6 improbable things before breakfast each week, which would be 6 thoughts that I have about writing, reading, or science fiction. So good morning, everybody, and let's dive in for the day. So I'm well over halfway finished with NaNo by now, which is absolutely amazing. I'm super excited. I think I'm about a little past 37,000 words. So getting really close, honestly. And so I guess this would be thing number 1. It's just my NaNo update. And I've done about half my word count for the day at this point. It's a little past 7 a.m. this morning. And so that means between recording and then putting out this podcast, that's probably all I'm going to have time to do before people start getting up for the day at 8, which means I'm going to have to get the rest of those words in later this day, which is not my favorite, but it is possible. I've done it plenty of other days this month. So probably in order of favorites, the times I like to write currently, my very favorite is definitely early in the morning before everybody wakes up. It feels really great to get it out of the way early on, and the house is quiet. It's just really, really nice. If I can do my entire word count or more before 8 a.m., that's what I would prefer. Second favorite time, which is probably what I'll try to get to today, would be kind of mid-morning during the baby's nap time. So normally I'll have the bigger girls either watching a show or doing something else that will keep them quiet so the baby can nap. So that's a good opportunity for me to do something like writing while everyone's kind of situated, as long as I can focus with, Coco Melon or Mickey Mouse Clubhouse in the background. And again, it just feels better for me to get it out of the way in the morning. So that would be my second favorite. Then if that doesn't happen, I can always go for nap time. We have 3 hours quiet time in the afternoon where the 2 little ones will nap for most of the time. And my oldest will kind of play quietly. And so that's a time, but I would prefer to not have to write during that time because I really would prefer to read, maybe even get a nap or, listen to a podcast, maybe do some crochet, like things that are a little more mentally restful. But, if I need to, I need to. That works too. Least favorite possible writing time is definitely after the kids go to bed, because not only am I very tired and will prefer to rest, but the tiredness actually just makes it so much more difficult to force my brain to get the words out. So all that to say, I'm hoping I can get the other half of that word count done sometime during the baby's nap this morning, but also nap time doesn't always happen, so we'll see. Number 2 is kind of along those same lines, which one thing I've really noticed a huge difference between doing NaNo this time and every other time I've done it. So I've never done it since I've been married or had kids. And I remember when I was doing it, when I was single and living at home, it could take me easily an entire day to get my word count in. I'd write a little bit, fiddle with my word count on the NaNo website, talk to some friends about writing, go do something else, get distracted online for a while, write a little more. Like, it just took so long. And now I'm actually finding it so easy to get my word count in for the most part in like the hour or 2 that I have before everybody gets up. And sometimes, like, what's really weird though too is, like, let's say that I have a couple of hours before people wake up. It'll take me a couple hours to get my word count in. But then a lot of times it'll be, I have other things I have to do in the morning, or I wake up a little later or whatever, and I only have 20 minutes before everyone gets up. And it takes me 20 minutes to get the same amount of words in. Like, I have just found, for me anyway, at least a lot of the time, writing is almost like a liquid. Like, it just seems to expand to fill whatever amount of time is available. So if I have the whole day available, it'll take me all day. But if I have 20 minutes available, I can do it in 20 minutes. And so, because there's been other times in my life where maybe I only had 20 minutes and I would do it. And so I would think, I'm going to do this every day. I'm going to write, 1,600, 2,000 words in 20 minutes every day. Sounds so easy. Like, I could get so much written. Did that ever happen? No. It just expands to fill whatever amount of time I give it. It's very, very strange. I'm not sure. There's some mental thing going on there, I'm sure, but It's true. So I'm sure I can find some way to use that better to my advantage. But I have found, moving on to number 3, that not only with writing, but a lot of these things, even reading, even other priorities, hobbies, devotional time, really a lot of things since I've had kids I've been more consistent about than before. And I think that is because the boundaries that kids just automatically enforce by just existing and needing you all the time helps me be aware of my time limitations and forces me to prioritize. There's a lot of things I used to pursue or get interested in or try to do when I was single that now I just kind of, maybe I'll get the urge to do this or that, and I'll kind of think, okay, I know I don't have a lot of extra time, so is that what I want to focus on, or would I rather focus on something else? And it's kind of easy in a sense because to just filter out those things because I have to. And I just think boundaries, whether that's with kids or with work or whatever is forcing you to have limitations in your life, I don't know, I think it's a really valuable tool, although again, it seems, strangely for me at least, impossible to enforce on myself. But, if I know I have 1 hour before the kids get up or 1.5 hours while the baby's napping or whatever it is, I can go, okay, here's my priorities. I need to have time with the Lord and my Bible reading. I need to do some writing. I want to make sure that I get reading in my life. So reading daily is something for me. And so those are going to be my top 3 in that order. And I'm going to do those in that order. And it's much easier for me to get off of Facebook, do those kinds of things because I know I have a limited amount of time. If I want to spend time with God today, if I want to write today, whatever it is, this is my chance. And so I'm actually much more consistent about Bible reading, writing when I'm in the mode, when I have a goal, and reading. I've read already, I think it's up to 60 books this year. I did 61 last year total, so I should probably surpass it this year. And it's because of that, because I know this is nap time. This is my reading time. So I'm going to sit down and read this book. I'm not going to get distracted by Facebook. And I used to watch a lot more TV than I do now. I still really enjoy TV shows, but I don't watch a ton like I used to because if I have to prioritize, I know I would rather read. So I'm going to spend more of my free time reading. So I don't know, just being aware of that is super helpful to me. Whatever it is in your life that's limiting you, just kind of seizing that and using it as a time management aid. Number 4, moving on to the actual writing, I think I shared last week how I struggle with the logistics in writing, with saying, he went here and there and she did this and that with her hands and those kinds of things. I struggle to show naturally and to show enough and not too much and those kinds of things. And along similar lines, just showing the passage of time and how much to summarize versus how much to really show in real time what's happening, that's very hard for me. I think I used to be much more of a summarizer, and I would show, long passages of time pretty frequently without actually showing what was happening and the details and the sensory details. And so now because I was made aware of that, I kind of swung the other way where I'm very wary of any summary. So I'll say, I'll walk through, my character's day, but then I'm like, I can't, the reader doesn't want to see every detail of every day. Like I need to be able to say, and then the next few weeks, blah, 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 just here's some general thing that happened over this week. And then we move on to something interesting to read about that happened the week after that, and I need to be able to jump over time while still having the reader feel that time has passed. And the balance of that is hard for me. And I think it's because just being immersed in it as the writer, it's really hard to get a accurate perspective on it. And so to me, it might feel like I can't tell if the passage of time is really being communicated, and I can't tell if I'm giving details that people really will not care about, like, oh my goodness, why are you reading about this girl's day at work? Like that's not interesting. We want to get on to, some conflict or something, So I guess that's where beta readers really come in as valuable in this and lots of other aspects of storytelling, as I'm too close to it. I can't tell. It's all in my head. So there are going to be things that I realize about it that other people can't possibly know. So I'm looking forward to getting this story. And really, this happens with all my stories. I think there's been some where, if you look at it with more distance and more perspective, it's like, oh, this day that the character went through was really only like 30 minutes. And this day was really like, 100 hours long. Like, you couldn't possibly do that much in one day. So a lot of those things I really rely on some, just a third person, more objective eye to help me with. Moving on to number 5, I mentioned last week that I was reading The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck, and I finished it. It's a very short book. I think if I didn't have kids, I probably could have read it in a day. As it is, I read it in less than a week. Very small little book, and I really enjoyed reading about the story behind it. So I enjoyed the book overall, just completely. I gave it a 5 on Goodreads, which is very unusual for me. But I really, once I was finished, I went back and read a little bit about the story behind the book and how it really was created as propaganda during World War II to encourage occupied towns in Europe, especially, to resist and to be encouraged to stand up against the oppressors and against the Nazis. Even though he doesn't really explain that it is the Nazis and that it is a European city, it's all a little bit vague in the details, but people living through it would have known exactly what he was referring to. But so I know propaganda has kind of a bad name, and this got brought up in my book club as we were discussing it. And one of the other ladies in book club I thought had such a beautiful observation about it, which she knew going into it that it was created as propaganda, which I did not know. But so that made her a little wary of it, because none of us likes the idea of, the government putting out resources that are supposed to manipulate us, and to get people to think a certain way. But one thing, and to be honest, I mean, even though this was put out technically as propaganda, it was really not favored by the United States government and people who felt that it wasn't demonizing enough to the enemy, and they were worried it would make people too sympathetic to the enemy, because it humanizes both sides while still preserving the fact that, yes, what was being done by, the Nazis was wrong. It showed them as still human, and a lot of people didn't like that, but it ended up being extremely powerful in encouraging the people it was directed to, the just people in the towns, just the everyday, the everyman, to stand up and to resist in the small ways that they could. And one thing that the lady at my book club brought up that she realized as she was reading it is that the thing that makes it different than some propaganda is that it was really truth. Like, it's really, like, I think in her words, she said, it's not propaganda if it's truth. There's no need to be manipulated if what you're saying is the truth. And what he was saying was true about the human spirit and about people, and just all the things that he communicated were true. And so whether that's intended to be propaganda or intended to just be fiction or whatever it is, truth will shine out and attract people and encourage people. Like, we found, especially because it kind of is vague in the details, that it can be encouraging to anyone that is going through something where they feel that they need to stand up and stand strong against something. And that's just a timeless truth. And so I love that. And it really encourages me to want to make sure that that's what I'm doing in my writing, is sharing truth that can be applicable to people and be encouraging and withstand the test of time and all of that. And so number 6, I think I talked about this once on the old podcast that I had that was on my Patreon, but I'm going to cover it again because it relates a little bit to what I just talked about writing truth, but it's also relative to the book that I'm writing right now, my book Shows. And that is, when you're making a fictional work autobiographical, how much is too much? I've read a lot about this because my book October that came out a few years ago had a lot of autobiographical aspects to it, and not in the story itself. The details of the plot, that was all completely made up. The setting, all of that was fictional, but all of the characters were, or not all of them, but all of the main characters were directly based on real people that I actually know, just put into different situations. And I struggled with that in that book, with how direct is okay, and also how much of that is just lazy, where it's hardly even fiction and I'm just taking details directly from the real world. Like, I've read some articles that were kind of disparaging of that approach and saying, you need to be more, I guess, creative than that. And the book I'm writing now has almost kind of the opposite approach to that, where the characters are not really based on anyone, but the events of the story, not all, but a lot of the events and settings are very directly based on my own life, and things that happened to me years ago, and experiences that I had. And I think I'm wrestling with that even more this time around, because I could be very direct and just tell the story of exactly what happened to me and like change the names and a few details and be like, here's a fiction story, and that's not my goal. But I do want to tell a story that is borrowing heavily. They say write what you know, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show experiences that I've been through and things that I've overcome in God's strength, and just things I've learned along the way. And those are truths that I'm wanting to share with people. And I felt that the best way is to infuse a lot of direct truth into it and really